I waste a lot of insulin, some days up to 25 or 50%. So despite being on a low carbohydrate diet and having good insulin sensitivity, I am still a very expensive guy. My body asks for about 20 to 30 units of insulin per day, but in practice I might use up to 40 or 50. And there's not so much that I can do about it. I follow recommended practices when it comes to insulin injections, so I pre-fill my needle before every injection to get rid of the air and to not miss out on any insulin. I replace my insulin pump every 3 days or so, and by doing so I waste a lot of insulin. Every time I pre-fill a needle I use up to half, 1 or maybe even 1.5 units. And when you replace the infusion set of a pump, there's always insulin remaining inside. And on a low carbohydrate diet, I apply a lot of insulin stacking and low dose corrections, so the wastes become even more, relatively speaking. But is there really no way that we can reduce insulin waste? Well, not so much unless it comes at the cost of glycemic control, but doctors and medical industry can do something about it. Modern day insulin is highly concentrated. We typically use U100 insulin, and that means that every milliliter contains 100 units. The higher this number gets, the more expensive the solution becomes, the more expensive also the waste becomes. And here's the thing, up to the early 90s of the last century, we used much lower concentrated insulins, like U40. Nowadays, U40 insulin is only found in the treatment of diabetic cats or dogs. And that's a pity, because lower concentrated insulin not only is less expensive, it has better pharmacokinetic properties. The absorption of insulin is more accurate and more reliable. And this is shown in several research papers when looking at the glycemic control in children, but also people like me on a low carbohydrate diet when insulin needs are low. And this makes sense because when we look at this insulin pen over here, say that I take a small dose of half a unit, this insulin pen can measure in half units, I get this tiny droplet of insulin. But if I press a little bit harder, I get a second droplet, I might even get a third droplet. So without knowing, I might be injecting 1 or even 1.5 units of insulin. And similar inaccuracies can arise at the injection site of your insulin pump. At higher concentrations, the errors increase. And this was also shown in the research with closed-loop pumps on children. The glycemic control increases when using lower concentrated insulins. So why was this U100 insulin introduced in the first place? Well, the official reading is that by applying a global standard for insulin concentration, the risks of making dosage mistakes reduces. That's not a really good argument, because if you make a mistake, the mistake still gets bigger when using higher concentrated insulins. The real reason, in my opinion, is to accommodate for severe insulin resistance and the higher intake of carbohydrates. Not such good arguments. So let's get rid of U100 insulin, let's go back to lower concentrated insulins for less waste and better glycemic control.